Hello and welcome back to A Christmas Carol, Annotate with me. In the last video we spoke about the Cratchit's Christmas. Scrooge has now left the Cratchit's Christmas, so we are now in the middle of stave 3. This video will not be very long. It will be focusing on some minor characters as well as setting to show how they allow for Scrooge to reflect on his own behaviour and also work to change him as a character. So although it's not a really important part of the whole text, it's still really important to know what happens within settings and with minor characters, just in case it does come up in your exam, even though it is highly unlikely that it will. So let's get started. By this time it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the spirits went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlours, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cosy dinner, with hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn to shut out cold and darkness. There all the children of the house were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. So here we see the description of people getting ready for Christmas, and how busy it is, but how joyous it is, and also the sense of community that we saw within the Cratchit family as well. And this is there to show Scrooge again how normal it is to form a community, to form bonds, to have close relationships, and how his isolation doesn't serve him any purpose at all. And this is what pretty much all of this stave is all about how Scrooge really needs to reflect on himself and think about how his isolation not only affects him, but it affects other people as well. Here again were shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbour's house, where woe upon the single man who saw them enter, artful witches, well, they knew it, in a glow. But if you had judged from the numbers of people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought that no one was at home to give them welcome when they got there, instead of every house expecting company and piling up its fires half chimney high. Blessings on it, how the ghost exulted, how it bared its breadth of breast, and opened its capacious palm, and floated on, outpouring with a generous hand its bright and harmless mirth and everything within its reach. So remember, the Ghost of Christmas Present is sprinkling his blessings on people, and he has already mentioned how he doesn't discriminate against sprinkling these blessings on people, but he tends to focus on the poor because to him they're more deserving of blessings. So we can only assume that these people are poor, but they're jolly, they're merry, they're joyous, they delight in the company of one another. The very lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky streets with specks of light, and who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirits passed, though little kenned the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though it were the burial place of giants, and water spread itself wheresoever it listed, or would have done so, but for the frost that held it prisoner, and nothing grew but moss and furze and coarse rank grass. Down in the west the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant, like a sullen eye, and frowning lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night. So we see throughout this passage here, and I've highlighted bits, the semantic field of isolation used throughout it. So all of the bits that are highlighted show examples of the semantic field of isolation. So the setting is barren and isolated. Nothing but the hardiest grass grows there, and there is a stagnancy created by the image of the water being caged. It is an unforgiving environment. The sun has left a streak of fiery red in the darkest night. So this seems like a place the Christmas spirits wouldn't usually exist in. What place is this? asked Scrooge. A place where miners live, who labour in the bowels of the earth, returned the spirit. But they know me, see. A light shone from the window of a hut, and swiftly they advanced towards it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled round a glowing fire. An old man and woman, with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon a barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy, and from time to time they all joined in the chorus. So surely as they raised their voices, the old man got quite blithe and loud, and so surely as they stopped, his vigour sank again. So in this passage, straight after the setting was set, the setting of a barren wasteland, there's the use of the semantic field of merriment to show how the miners that reside in this setting enjoy Christmas. We see that the miners who work there have managed to inject some festivity, despite the area that they live in, into the day. There's the description of a cheerful company here, so the use of personification to talk about the company is assembled and made up of the family who work there. Scrooge is being shown that Christmas can exist in the most unlikely places. The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Scrooge hold his robe, and passing on above the moor, sped whither? Not to see? To see. To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water, as it rolled and roared and raged among the dreadful caverns it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. So here the semantic field of fear is used to describe this particular setting that's on the sea, to speak about the setting as a dangerous place to work and a dangerous place to live. Built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks some league or so from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed, the while the air through there stood a solitary lighthouse. So this description serves a very similar purpose to the previous setting. The lighthouse is solitary, so described as solitary, so lonely and isolated, and being battered by the extreme weather of the coast. Despite that, though, as we get to meet the people who work here and live here, despite that, the two men working in the lighthouse wish each other Merry Christmas and toast the occasion. So Scrooge is being shown how common it is to see the worth of a sense of community and sharing. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds born of the wind one might suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it like the waves they skimmed. But even here, two men who watched the light had made a fire that through the loophole in the thick stone wall shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea. Joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Christmas in their can of grog, and one of them, the elder two, with his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather, as the figurehead of an old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Again the ghost sped on. So again, these characters are seen as singing again as well, obviously symbolic of joy and merriment. Again the ghost sped on, above the black and heaving sea, on, until being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout and the bow, the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it. So here we see further evidence for Scrooge of the way the Christmas message of hope and kindness permeates everywhere you turn. And that's why it's really important to look at these minor settings and characters, because they do add to the changing of Scrooge. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him. So we're going to stop here. In the next video, we're going to visit Scrooge's nephew Fred on Christmas Day, and that's a really, really important scene. Okay, so this was only a short video. We won't be adding any quotation booklets to this revision booklet because, like I said, it was quite a minor scene. But if you are finding our videos useful, please remember to comment, like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.